Welcome to the EW Podcast. I'm your host, Eric White. In today's episode, I speak with Anthony Magnabosco. Anthony is a skeptic and atheist from San Antonio, Texas, who has been practicing and promoting street epistemology since 2013. Anthony has had several hundred chats, many of them on camera and uploaded to his YouTube channel, on a variety of claims, including gods, ghosts, karma, law of attraction, and a variety of social and political topics. He is also a founder and the current executive director of the new nonprofit organization called Street Epistemology International. Anthony has given dozens of talks and workshops on street epistemology at conferences and events domestically and internationally. We spend our time in this episode discussing street epistemology, which is essentially a form of dialogue that involves asking questions to better understand the foundations on which a belief is built. It's all about better understanding a person's beliefs. This is in contrast to a debate where each person presents an argument to support their own point of view. I discovered Anthony's work in 2020 as I was having horrible conversations about contentious topics like police brutality and Trumpism, and learning about him and the SE community is a moment for which I'm extremely grateful. I was definitely one of the people trying to speak most loudly and not taking time to truly understand the other side, which I thought was wrong. So watching his videos and taking time to learn about this approach has made me a better conversation partner, or at least I'd like to think so. In this conversation, we discuss what SE is, some basic tips for using it properly, and the ethics of the approach. We talk about doubt and ask whether it should be avoided or embraced, the difficulties people face in having conversations today, and much more. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with Anthony, and if you're someone who wants to have better conversations with friends, family, and strangers, I think you will as well. I highly recommend visiting the show notes for this episode and learning more. There's a lot there. I truly believe that if this practice were to be embraced by the general population, that there would be way less polarization in our society. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Anthony Magnabosco. Okay, so I'm here with Anthony Magnabosco. Thanks for joining me, Anthony.
Thanks again for having me back. Yeah, nice to talk to you.
Yeah, it's nice to get you back on. We originally talked for the Unity Now podcast, which separate channel, but I hope that we can keep that episode worth listening to and cover some different ground here.
For sure.
And I would, like people to be able to go listen to that as well if they're interested. And, you have plenty of other resources online that people can check out, which I'll make sure to link to in regards to street epistemology and your work.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
We didn't really, I think whenever we talked on the Unity Now podcast, we kind of just jumped right into politics and street epistemology. But I think I'd like to start this by giving more background on who you are, how you got into street epistemology, why you thought it was so important that you have, it seems dedicated this part of your life to. If you want to just take it and let me know who you are.
Well, I've gotten to the point where I was realizing that arguing with people, giving them evidence, ridiculing them, didn't seem to land with them. Giving people things that I thought that they would find convincing doesn't seem to work. And I'm more than likely, many of your guests can probably empathize with that. And I discovered this book, back in 2013 now. It's a while ago now I think about it. Man, we've come a long way since then. But it's called A Manual for Creating Atheists. And it was saying, hey, there's a different way of talking with people about these deeply held beliefs, especially God beliefs. That was the focus of the book, where you can use questions and challenge people in a respectful way where you're not so much focused on their claim, but you're getting into the quality of their reasons and the methods that they're using. And the book really spent a lot of time on faith, that a lot of religious people will say, I can say that I know this to be true. That's the epistemology part, because I'm taking it on faith that it's true. So that was one of many methods that people say that they use to verify their evidence, to say, I can be sure that this is true. And when you engage with somebody in a respectful way where you're asking questions and you're driving to that foundation, which is separate from a person's ego and their sense of self, you can really make a lot of progress. So that was appealing to me back in 2013. So I set out to record conversations with complete strangers where I was trying to use this approach. And my first several forays into it were not very successful or good. Mm-hmm. It was very difficult to not slip into the argumentative ways that I was, at that point, I think, more comfortable with, because I was watching a lot of online examples of atheists arguing with theists and giving them counterpoints to the points that they were raising.
More debate style arguments?
More debate style, which interestingly wasn't even my own personal preference, but it seemed like those were really the only examples that seemed to be out there. So I was utilizing that while at the same time cognizant that there was probably this better way. So if you ever want to take the time to watch my journey from that older style to the newer style, the videos are out there. I don't know how familiar you are with my work, but that's all out there. So you can see how we've really come, not just myself, but other people who watch the videos and are content creators, or they don't even make any videos. They're having these conversations. We've really run with the method since it came out. And I think we've developed it even further. And then the author released a second book called How to Have Impossible Conversations, which I think observed the interactions that we were having and noticing, hey, there's improvements to build on here. And this has really taken off. It shifted, I think, from niche YouTube content creator kind of thing to this might be a really serious way of improving discourse in our country, in our world, across different tribes. So that was extremely appealing to me, because all we have to do is just look around and see how things seem to be falling apart. You know, we're arguing, we're talking past each other, we're not listening, we're misrepresenting, we're finding the craziest example on the other side. And then it's a horrible way to navigate life when you share this planet with other people. And it's been good. It's been growing and it's been improving me. And I'm pleased to have any opportunity to talk about it, because I want to introduce people to it so you can see what we're doing and maybe criticize it or consider adding to it.
Yeah. One of the things I love about watching your videos is sometimes you can tell the people are a little squirmish. They're feeling nervous. They're giving off body signals. Maybe they have their arms crossed, and you really get to see what it's like to watch someone think, or to watch someone really be challenged. And you're not challenging them where you're making them feel stupid or anything, but you're making them really consider what their beliefs are about. And I'm thinking of this one video. It was on a college campus with a female who you were talking about is gender binary. And you could just see her. She was kind of looking around. She had her arms crossed. You could tell she was like, I don't know. And from my perspective, it was almost like she was looking around to see if her peers were around so that she wouldn't say anything that crossed the line and be heard by someone else.
Yes.
Is that a typical thing? I feel like that is a major factor in what's going on in our world, is just people wanting to be part of the in-group that they're in.
I think it might be topic and personality dependent. I don't normally see that type of apprehension that I saw in that example. That one's on my channel. I don't remember her name, but I have two examples where I'm talking about gender with people. And that one in particular, a lot of the commenters noticed, and I got the sense of it too when I was speaking with them, that they were a little bit concerned about giving their true views because of the potential fallout that could happen. And yet at the end of the talk, I think they were excited about the possibility of it appearing on YouTube too.
Yeah, she was like, she said something like, "Put me on YouTube. I want to be famous," or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it was a little bizarre. More often than not, though, people are very confident in their views. They're eager to share them, and well, that in turn can kind of get them into trouble because, as you no doubt have seen, as you may have seen from these videos, a few questions in, people do actually start to take another look at their views and in their body language or the words that they're using seem to demonstrate, well, reflection at the very least. They are thinking about it, it seems. And that's amazing to see. That was probably one of the few examples where somebody gave me the impression that maybe they were holding back on just laying it all out there, because if she really shared her views on gender, maybe there could have been some backlash. And I can understand that mindset. You know, I never met them before. They don't know where this video is going. They don't know my ulterior motives for recording it and putting it online. And we have lots of examples of people looking stupid online, let's face it. And I'm not going for that. And no matter what I say to allay their concerns, that's probably always lurking at the back of people's minds as I'm interviewing them. But we should probably be clear. You don't have to do street epistemology. You don't have to go out with a camera and record this stuff.
Yeah.
I hope that's evident to people who are watching this, that most people who use this approach don't even initiate it. Well, most people who know this approach don't even use it, it seems. That's the sense that I'm getting, that I think we're hitting a ceiling where people learn it. However, I'm not sure how many people are then putting it into practice. But most people, I think, wait for opportunities to then start asking a few questions, and they probably don't get as involved as you might see on a YouTube video. But I'm hoping that we can change that.
Yeah, well, I think that's what, one of the values that your videos add is, you can read about it all the time. You can absorb all that kind of written information, but seeing it in action, I think provides a different sort of blueprint of how a conversation could go, which has been, I'm not out in the street asking random people about their beliefs, but I've definitely found myself in groups with friends. Instead, if someone makes a claim that I'm like, oh, that's interesting, and I'll start asking them questions, which is totally different than what I was doing a year ago. And so I think it has a lot to do with this approach. And I have like a to-do list item on my to-do list that I spend an hour every day trying to be a better questioner. And sometimes that involves watching SE videos, watching various interviews. So that's like a thing that I'm trying to do, which was spurred on by discovering these videos. So
wow, good for you. That's great. I wish more people did that. I have had a lot of people say, I read the book a few years ago. I thought that I understood the concepts a little bit, but it wasn't until I started watching videos of people doing this approach that the light bulb started going off about the technique and how you can do it and how difficult it could be to actually implement it, and the potential that it has on improving discourse amongst human beings. That's really encouraging, that people could watch a few videos and be more comfortable with the approach than if they had read it maybe or read a review of the book or something to that effect.
Yeah, well, I think the one thing that happens to me when I watch the videos is, at least initially when I first started watching them, I started replaying conversations I've had and wondering how they could have been different had I gone a direction that maybe you went in a video. And it forces a little self-reflection, I think, that maybe is different from just reading about how to do the approach. You kind of like I said, you get to see the person thinking, and you get to see them actually not go into a defensive mode, but to go into a real contemplative state where they're really starting to examine their beliefs. So I think that's what's been useful for me.
You make me think of an interesting point, that you are seemingly wanting to improve your conversations. And I don't know if everyone's there. I don't know if every human being, they likely don't think the same. Like they're content with the interactions that they're having. They may think that this is the best that's out there. I'm the best conversation partner available or something. You need to start with a little bit of humility that maybe this is an area that I need to improve on. And then also be motivated to look, for example, I think it's incredible that you spend so much time trying to improve your interactions. even if it's just watching some poor ones and then asking yourself, how could I do this better? That's one thing that we're starting to do in the SE community. We've only done it for about a month or so. Every Sunday, we'll take an SE conversation, or we're thinking about looking at an interaction that didn't go so well, that's not even SE, and playing it, pausing it, speaking to it, resuming it, and using that as a training aid. Because I think that more often than not, I think people probably do want to have better conversations. They're probably frustrated by what they see. And yet they may just not know that there are other options out there for them. And that's why I want to try to promote this method, because when it comes to deeply held beliefs on contentious issues, that the SE approach seems to be the best, at least initially, and probably even for the duration of the conversation. But if you've never met a person before, or maybe you burnt a bridge with them and you're looking to restart a conversation or initiate a new one, start with the street epistemology approach, where you're feeling them out and figuring out where to meet them before you consider other tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I wonder, going back to what you said about people not wanting to improve how they have interactions with people, maybe, I think about those kinds of people and imagine that in their day-to-day life, they're meeting other people who are on that same level, who don't see themselves as having a deficiency, we'll say, or maybe area for improvement in that particular arena. But then if they come across someone like you, or they see an interaction, I know you've talked about Joe Rogan seemingly using aspects of this approach in his interviews. Maybe it just takes that initial interaction to force a self-reflection, instead of just walking around in your day-to-day life, butting heads with people who don't see it that way.
That very well could be the case, that people just don't know that option is there until they stumble across it or hear somebody using it. But even if you noticed it or came across it, a lot of people will say, that's just not the approach for me. I wouldn't be good at it because I can't stay calm when I'm engaging with people. And there are some tips. We maybe that might be a fun thing to cover at some point. We don't have to, but there are some things that you can do to stay calm and tamp down your own ego and your goals and your position, setting aside all of that for the purpose of advancing the conversation for them to think about it. And that could be a back and forth too. I hope people understand that, even though many of the examples that you might stumble across, or even if you seek them out, you'll notice it's usually a one-way directed thing. I might be out there with my whiteboard. Can I have 5 minutes of your time? You pick the claim. I'd like to ask you some questions. And then usually it goes about 20, 30 minutes. Sometimes these conversations go fairly long. But it's often a one-way type of thing where it can be a back and forth. Mm-hmm. It really can, and it probably even should.
Yeah, I feel like that's the next level of it, right? Is you have the one-way street is kind of like an introductory course into this thing exists. I'm going to now challenge you. But the next level up is whenever that person turns around and starts asking the question or questions, because now you're sharing information, you're getting closer to the truth by two competing people trying to understand each other better, right? As opposed to
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, you may notice in earlier videos, you probably remember this, but if sometimes people would ask me mid-conversation or even at the start, well, before we get into examining my claim, can I know where you stand on it? And I would often try to set that onto the back burner and say something like, well, if you don't mind, I'd like to explore your position first, and then you can ask me any questions you want. That was usually my pat answer, because I didn't want to influence them. I didn't want them to become defensive if I disagreed with them, or more compliant if we happened to agree. I wanted to stay objective. However, when you do that, a lot of the comments under these videos were something to the effect of, what are you hiding? Why aren't you revealing your position? See, this is disingenuous because you're not sharing your view. When I was intentionally not doing that because I didn't want to influence them. Now, what I learned is that because of that feedback and experimentation, I'm totally comfortable sharing my view in a way that I think would still keep the person open. It might even give me an opportunity to model some behaviors that I would like to see into them. So if they were asking me some questions, I might intentionally add a few seconds longer to think about it and get my words straight before I responded to them. Because if they allowed me the opportunity to question them, maybe they would be a little bit more civil and contemplative when I ask those questions in return. So you can definitely mix it up. Oh, the other thing I found is that sometimes revealing your position, well, it can actually open them up, because maybe they know somebody who has that same view, or they're actually entertaining that view. And now they're grateful to finally have encountered somebody who is thinking about this thing that they've been thinking about. So you never know where it's going to go. But ultimately, I really want to try to make it, and this is, I think, what we're trying to do in street epistemology, is making it about them. Let's use your words. Let's identify your claim, your level of certainty that this is true. Let's get to the reasons that contribute to your confidence that this is true. And then let's get into the methodology. It's all about you. And we can shift it back and forth. But I think you lose a little momentum of driving down to the foundation of what's propping this all up when you have these interruptions of a back and forth. But I definitely understand that to be an honest civil conversation partner, you probably have to allow that back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking of the sex is binary conversation again. And I don't know what your belief is in that, but if you had said that I believe sex is binary, would she have been more open to going down that route?
She may have felt more comfortable revealing her position if she knew that I agreed with her. And again, that's really what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to reduce as many influencers in their view as possible, which baffles me, because a lot of people will say, well, what you're doing, Anthony, by asking all these questions and leaving people to think about these things, this is a form of persuasion or manipulation, which it may be to some degree. I'm not exactly sure. But when you notice the levels that we're going to try to not influence or manipulate the person that we're speaking with about their views, it surprises me still to this day that we get people who worry that it is one form or another of those things.
Well, if that is the case, then what is the point in having conversations at all? I mean, this is the most neutral. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Like there's probably some persuasion going on at this very moment between the two of us. I don't know if you can have an interaction with another human being in any form, whether it's verbal, text, or otherwise, where you're not, to some degree, meeting the definition of persuasion or manipulation, maybe. But the thing is, in SE, in street epistemology, I think we're aware of, we tend to pay very close attention to the criticisms and concerns, because we want to make this an ethical, we want to try to, I think, I'm trying to, let me just speak for myself. I'm trying to develop the most ethical form of conversation where it's effective in helping a person take another look at their views. And I think a big part of that is informed consent and gentle, kind inquisition. If you can bolt those two things together, so the person is understanding what they're getting themselves into, they are agreeing. You might even periodically check how are we doing? Is this okay? Is this moving too fast? Give them an out. This isn't sea lioning to keep asking questions to frustrate your conversation partner. It's to bring clarity to their views, bring them clarity to their own views. And I'm along for the ride, also gaining clarity. And maybe I'm a little confused. Can you help me understand this? And be very kind and respectful and gentle about it, and recognize if maybe through body language or the words that they're using, that maybe they are becoming a little overwhelmed, or you're overloading their circuits. And that's usually when I'll end it and say, why don't we end it now? Give it a couple weeks. And if you see me out here again, come on up and let's have a second talk.
Yeah. And people do come back.
Yeah.
They like to get those puzzle pieces.
They do. I don't have any around here at the moment, but yeah.
Have you ever revised any of your beliefs as a result of one of these conversations?
It wasn't just one conversation, but I've had a few conversations with people about gun control. I have, and I still do to this day, I think have a little bit of a reaction, a negative reaction, when I see somebody in Texas, in my hometown, maybe at my kid's school even, walking around with a gun on their hip. I think that that's crazy. However, I've talked to enough people who are proponents of guns who have basically made the case of, listen, guns are out there. They're not going away. I don't even know how you'd go about getting them from people. There might be some ways to incentivize people to do it, but I think there's a large percentage of people who are never going to give up their weapons. They're out there, and maybe the safest thing for people is to have another gun nearby if you needed to step in and take somebody out who was using one recklessly. Let's just put it that way. So I've shifted. I used to go out with signs to protest people who were doing open carry.
Oh, really?
And now I'm not walking around with a gun on my hip, don't get me wrong, but I no longer go to those rallies. I no longer troll them on Facebook or something like that, which I think kind of gets to, I think there's a relationship between your confidence in your claim to the actions that you're willing to carry out. Think about that for a second. So the more certain I am that I'm right about guns being dangerous, like that open carry or concealed carry is a bad idea, I'm probably going to be more motivated to vote differently or share a post, tweet something out, ridicule a group. If I notice an article that's disparaging of that position, I might share it. However, as you start backing off on that stuff, it affects the way that you are interacting with others on those topics.
Yeah. And I mean, as you did, examining the foundations of where that belief came from, obviously has an effect. And that, I mean, as someone who's practicing SE, the goal, I mean, not that the goal is to make people revise their beliefs, but you must also be open to having your beliefs revised, right? You can't just go out there steadfast in what you believe and expect.
You can.
Yeah.
You certainly can. You can do that. But if you're advocating for an ethical application of this approach and you're trying to avoid being persuasive or manipulative, then I think being open to what your conversation partner is saying is crucial. I do want to add, though, that sometimes a minute into a conversation where somebody says, especially supernatural things, where I've had hundreds of conversations with people about gods and ghosts, karma, the law of attraction, you name it.
Yeah.
I've probably talked with people about it. You can almost anticipate where they're going to go. And I have to resist the temptation to assume that I know where they're going or form questions that will detract them from going in a direction that they may be. You kind of have to go where they take you, even though you suspect that this is probably a view that they can't back up to themselves, to their own level of their own level of certainty, to their own standard. Rushing it is problematic because I could miss an opportunity to understand that they really have a good reason for thinking that that's true. So it's important to try to stay as neutral and open as possible.
Yeah. Why did you decide that you would start filming these? I mean, obviously you can go out and have street epistemology conversations with people without bringing a camera along. What was the motivation for recording them?
That's a good question. I think originally it was to show other people that somebody was taking these ideas seriously. And I wanted to see if it worked. I wanted to see if the methods that the author was purporting could live up to the hype. So I wanted to have examples. And I'm really glad that I did record things and put them on my YouTube channel and share them in the Street Epistemology Facebook groups and Reddit and Discord server now, because people were watching them and then critiquing me and saying, you completely mangled that belief scale that you came up with. Or did you notice when she said faith and you didn't even ask for a clarification of the definition of that word? So recording my conversations and putting them online and then listening intently to what the feedback was. And sometimes you get trolls who are just there to just knock you down. So you have to develop a thick skin. If you're going to start uploading stuff, there's a fellow that started uploading things and he must have sent me 5 messages over the last 24 hours of, what do I do with all this negative feedback that's coming in? And my advice is just take it in and try to incorporate it into your next encounter. And that's really what I've been trying to do is to show a natural progression of the method I mean, I think I've even reached a point now where I'm going to start going through and unlisting some of those older videos
Oh,
because,
really?
yeah, because if somebody has no idea what, let's say there's somebody who listens to this podcast and they immediately go out to look for a video, but they find one from 2013 or 2014, they're not getting the latest and greatest examples. And I think I know for a fact that there have been people who have been dissuaded from learning more about SE because they watched something that I recorded in 2015, and it was an ugly mix of SE plus counter apologetics, and it was sloppy. So yeah, I want to start removing those, but not to the point where people who are really, really into this, where like that other content creator or somebody like yourself or somebody watching or listening, where if they wanted to see the progression, they could still do so, but it wouldn't be so easily findable,
Yeah.
on YouTube.
I wonder if there's a way to put a disclaimer on those old ones or put them in a private playlist or something. Cause I'm a big fan of not deleting the growth. That's like,
Right. I think what I'll do is, well, I'm going to make some of those unlisted. There's a way to put a card, up to 5 cards or links on top of a video that I think will have a warning. So I'm going to repeat this warning 5 times. I'm going to have something in the description, and you can also pin a comment now also on a video. And I think at that point, listen, if you still watch that and get the impression that this is the most current example of SE, then there's not much more I can do.
yeah. I'm sure, recording them also, I'm sure helped you improve as well. I know for me, listening back to podcasts, I was transcribing them for a while, and transcribing especially was such an interesting experience, seeing how many times I said like or kind of or
Yes.
It's you can hardly believe that that's you speaking. I'm sure. Did you have something similar happen to you?
Huge, because I would not only go out and record the conversation, I would listen to it again. Sometimes I would just save the audio and listen to it as I'm exercising or working in the yard. But yeah, when you upload it to YouTube, or I was also like, I don't know, maybe around like, I'm trying to stop saying these words.
Yep, me too.
Right around 2016, I started adding captions to the videos, and that was an incredibly useful task because you have to slow things way down. Sometimes you have to rewind it and play it again. And you notice that, oh my gosh, I took a minute to ask that question when I really could have done it in 10 seconds. And it's evident that they are totally confused. And what I thought was reflective thinking was confusion. So it's kind of a humbling process when you go through and you watch things that you thought were so good, and then you look back and think, oh, it really wasn't quite so good. I dropped the ball there, here and there. But that's a huge extra. That's an advantage to do if you have the time, where if you can record it, try to get the person's consent. Even if you can do audio only, that would be good. These days, well, I'm probably not going to be going out and doing any more talks with my cameras anymore. But earlier in 2020, I was going out, and by that time I think I had 3 cameras going. I had an earpiece in to broadcast to the Discord server so that the 30 or 50 people who are listening live can listen in. And what happens to Anthony when he's in between these conversations? And does he upload every conversation? I wonder if he's just uploading the good ones. Well, you can literally listen into a whole day's worth of talks and figure out why I decided not to upload that talk. I even talk about it afterwards. Yeah.
It's great that you were able to record that and use it as a self-evaluation. But, there's going to be a large percentage of people who learn about the practice who aren't going to do that, who are still going to be curious to want to try and improve their use of it. How can someone who wants to do it but doesn't want to record every conversation, what kind of mechanisms for improvement can they employ or use to help them get better?
Well, what I would recommend is immediately after you have a talk with somebody, if you have the option, because sometimes just as one talk's wrapping up, somebody else might be coming up or curious about what you're doing, and then you might forget. But if you can, jot down some notes. Try to record what you think went well in that conversation and what didn't go so well. You might even want to ask your conversation partner before they walk away, hey, if you don't mind, would you give me a little bit of feedback as far as what you thought about that talk? And you're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm here to grow. I realize that I probably didn't do some things that were as productive that I thought that they were. Would you be interested in giving me a little constructive criticism? So you can always do that. Sometimes that's not an option because they're long gone. It might even be your Uber driver, right? So you got dropped off at your destination and now you're wondering if that was good or not. But you can still do a little self-assessment. You might even want to talk about the conversation that you had with others who are interested in SE, where they may ask you questions about the talk that you never even considered. Like, what was the environment like? Was it noisy there at the time, or did they seem rushed? How many other people were walking around? So sometimes just bouncing your conversation off of somebody else can be helpful in growing.
Yeah, I could see the, well, I mean, for me personally, just to give context to this statement, times that I've used it most have been with friends and people I'm familiar with already, where we get into some hot button issue and maybe have a disagreement. And I could see the asking for feedback being a useful mechanism in those types of circumstances where, especially if it's someone who maybe you've had an unsuccessful conversation with before and you employ this method. And now after you're done talking, hey, I know we had a hard time the first time, but that felt like it went better to me. Did it not to you? Like, what did you like better about that conversation? It could be a useful way to go about it.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, try to do that as much as you possibly can. And hopefully they're being straight with you and they're being upfront and giving you good feedback and not just catering to your ego. So you have to be careful though, I think, with SE, because when you find a conversation partner who's open and they're seriously thinking about your questions, you may have experienced this yourself, but it's a really fun feeling. It's exciting to watch somebody think when you've asked them a really good question.
And you feel like you're connecting. The connection feels much deeper.
It does. It's a sincere connection. However, it could incentivize you to keep asking questions beyond their level of comfort to the point where you might seem like you're pushing an agenda, or you're not so much interested in what their beliefs are as you are in getting them to a destination of some sort that they're not ready to go to, or they're not even willing to entertain. So also try not to come across as condescending. I think there's a fine line there as well. And it's probably useful to get some feedback. Like, you can ask, at any point, did you feel like I was talking down to you or not listening to you, or that type of thing? Sometimes some of the feedback I get, it's not usually, I don't think I've ever received feedbacks from, on Twitter maybe, but in a personal face-to-face or video conversation, I don't think I've ever had somebody say, I got the sense that you were being condescending to me, that I was lower than you in this exchange. I do get that kind of feedback from people who watch the exchanges. People often who share the same position as the person that I'm interrogating kindly with my questions. I think that they think that I'm being condescending, but the person that I'm speaking with doesn't get that impression. I certainly don't want to give that impression, but try to keep that in the back of your mind too, is how will this be perceived by this person that I'm speaking with and others who might be watching or listening to this conversation? Remind yourself, maybe, even if you're not, pretend that you're on a stage and people are watching your interaction. That, I think, helps kind of keep things on track and civil.
But does that really matter, though? Does it matter what other people think if the person that you're focused on and giving your attention to doesn't feel that way?
It doesn't matter for my conversation partner, because that conversation's long gone. It's in the can. It's been recorded. You have to keep in mind, though, is that I'm also going out with my camera to record examples, not only to track my own progress, but to show people how to do this. And people are watching how to do this. And then there are other people who are alarmed at what we're doing. And they're like, stop doing. They haven't literally said stop doing it. But the sense that I'm getting is, why are you doing this? This is problematic. Essentially, you need to stop doing this. Why are you like, there's resistance to what we're doing. So it's always at the back of my mind that I'm wondering, my harshest critics, I wonder what they would be thinking about the way that I'm behaving at this very moment in this conversation. That goes through my mind mid-conversation because of my focus. My focus is education, training. I want to demonstrate or illustrate this technique to other people. So there's a lot of things going through my mind. But my recommendation is, if this is your first time having a conversation with where you're doing essay, you don't have to burden yourself with cameras and recording equipment, even though there's a benefit probably of at least getting the audio for playback later. You don't have to worry about, you likely don't have an audience, but thinking that you do has benefits. That's the point that I think I'm trying to make.
I think that's a good point. And I think another thing that I've found to be helpful, and I keep focusing on conversations with people I know because that's kind of the arena I've been playing in.
That's cool. I'm actually interested in hearing more about that, because most of the conversations I have where I use this approach is with strangers.
Yeah.
And I've used it with family and I found it more difficult. So I'm interested in, I would like to see more people get into SE where they're using it with people who know them. But how do you record an example of that to share with other people so we can compare the distinctions? That's one of the challenges.
They generally start more organically. But one thing I found to be useful, and I've done this with my girlfriend a couple of times, is if she says something, I'll be like, I've been practicing this street epistemology thing. Do you mind if I practice on you right now, if I ask you some questions about that? And it gives her the opportunity to either play the game or not. And I've found that has been very helpful in just letting the person I'm talking to know where I'm coming from, because maybe they're not used to me asking 50 questions about what their belief is, and they might be turned off by that. But if they know that
I think that's great. And that's kind of what we do on the street with a stranger, don't we? We say, I'm doing this thing called street epistemology. May I have your consent to do this? And I think if you skip that step with somebody who you know, they're going to notice the difference of the approach, but they're not understanding why you're doing it. And that's going to come across as insincerity, which is going to probably raise defenses and damages the trust likely that you have with this person too. So I think that's brilliant. I think I would recommend that people do that. Just lay it all out on the line. Maybe even say, would you even like to watch a couple of videos where somebody is using this approach on a completely different topic or the same topic? There's nothing inherently bad about this approach as far as I can tell. So the more transparency that you have, that you give people into the approach, the better. And then ultimately it's up to them. Gosh, I've watched some of these videos and now I know that Eric is going to be asking me these questions about this topic. And I don't know if I'm ready to consider my beliefs at that deep of a level that I've seen happen in these. But that's all good, because then they can maybe watch another video, or a month has passed and now they're ready to entertain your idea of exploring that claim. So try to be as transparent as possible.
Or there's someone who, as we mentioned earlier, doesn't know that a different form of conversation exists and they're used to the debate style arguments.
Yes.
And so forecasting that you're practicing this form of dialogue, they're like, ooh, what is this? This is something.
That's an excellent point. I think a lot of people assume, oh my gosh, they want to talk about this potentially contentious subject, that every time I've talked about the subject becomes contentious. So why would I want to have another contentious topic? I'm having a good day. I don't want to have it ruined. Right?
Yeah.
But if you can give people a heads up that it doesn't have to be that way, like you could say, if I use this approach in the way that it's designed, we should both come away from the conversation with a better understanding of each other's views. And we'll probably end with a greater clarity, a better understanding of each other's views. And it will probably end on a really positive note. It's not going to probably be a drag out fight. If it becomes one, then I've probably deviated in some way. But to your point, they may not even be aware that that's an option.
Yeah. And I've actually recently, some friends and I, a small group, we all got tested for COVID before hanging out, but we were hanging out in this like log cabin here in California, and there was a person there, a good friend, who I had gotten into a really not ugly, but not productive disagreement about police brutality with earlier in the year. And I had this vision of her political identity, I guess, wrapped up in how I viewed her. And by doing this approach, we were talking about universal basic income. And before this conversation, I was like, oh, she's such a hardcore liberal. She's far left. And then we talked about universal basic income, and I got into asking questions about why she didn't support it. And I was like, well, she's actually much more nuanced and complex than I was giving her credit for. So by switching to this approach, it allowed me to connect with this person on a deeper and more meaningful level, which I'm very grateful for.
A great example.
Yeah.
Fantastic example. Yeah, that might be one of the biggest sources of frustration when we encounter somebody from a different position on a claim. That I think a lot of the frustration from these conversations is that we think we understand what their reasons are for thinking that UBI is a bad idea, right? Because maybe we've watched a video where that was tackled and we were given the answers on how to respond, and we're so ready to give them the answers that we think they'll find convincing. But if you don't slow down and actually listen to their position and how they're justifying it to themselves, you're going to frustrate them if you argue views that they don't have, or tackle straw men, tackle arguments that aren't even the arguments that they're making. It's going to lead to a frustrating encounter. So that's what's so good about the approach is, no, this is where you stand. I'd really like to understand how you got there. Can you walk me through it? What would you say is your biggest reason for holding that position? And listening to them, repeating it back to make sure you understand it, clearing up the definitions of words, ask them for an example, and then that will help you form better questions down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess at this point, if anyone is curious about the methodology, I don't want to get too deep into how to do it necessarily, but if someone is curious, again, we'll link to all the appropriate links in the show notes here. But maybe we can get into the calming tips that you mentioned before, and how to stay present in a conversation that might be difficult, and how to stay calm and level-headed. You know, how can someone do this?
Well, I think I gave one of the tips earlier where you could pretend that you're being watched by lots of people. And that wasn't a hard stretch for me because I was recording my videos. And yes, I didn't upload every one. I have an archive of probably 1,000 conversations, and not all of them are good. There's a reason that they didn't make it to YouTube. But I remind myself that somebody could be watching this encounter at some point, and I want people to have a good reflection of myself. So that helps, reminding yourself that maybe somebody could be watching, or that word of your conversation could get back to somebody. So you really do want to be on your best behavior. So that actually helps. The other thing that I found is that asking yourself before you even think about using this tool, ask yourself what your motivations are. What am I really hoping to get out of this exchange? So in the case of the friend on UBI or your girlfriend about whatever, I don't remember if you even said the topic. It's not important.
We're actually talking about law of attraction, which is interesting.
Oh, law of attraction. Yeah. Okay. So if you ask yourself what your motivations are before you even do that, what am I hoping to achieve here? Because they may be wondering what your motivations are, and you may even have an obligation to tell them what your motivations are. So like you might say, listen, I don't think law of attraction is real. My suspicion is that you can't justify it to your own standard. And if that's the case, I'd like to help you lower your confidence in that claim. You can lay it all out there, but you can be very sloppy about it where you suddenly start raising defenses on these things too. But more than likely, they will be able to relate with what you're saying because they probably think that you have views that you can't justify to yourselves. So it's a back and forth. So maybe just reminding them that they likely have the same motivation. What's another thing? Another thing I think would be recognizing that there might be some topics that are just triggers for you. So it might be the gender topic or God. I meet a lot of former believers who are now atheists, and they just cannot stay calm when the topic of God comes up. But if there was any other topic, karma, law of attraction, maybe a political claim, if these claims get a little bit too close to God, that's when I notice that they start losing it. But recognize within yourself that there may just be some topics that I'm not good at, and I need to learn how to control my temper and my ego and make it about them with these safer topics before I move on to topics that I know that I just can't manage myself. Those are about three that I can think of off the top of my head. I could probably rattle off some more if you wanted to go.
Well, that actually sparked a thought, so maybe we can diverge here a little bit. But isn't that, I mean, having a trigger point is one thing, but deciding that you're going to avoid that trigger point isn't actually doing anything good, right? I mean, if I have a trigger point talking about police brutality, this was brought up before. So if that's a trigger point for me, and I notice that my conversations when I talk about it go poorly, wouldn't it be better to resolve that trigger point within me than to just avoid having that conversation and let the trigger point remain? Because that seems to be part of the problem today is people have so many trigger points and things that they're unwilling to even listen to, that we are in this culture of, oh, you said this, you're a white supremacist, or you said this, you're a fascist. And it's like, we can't all just be having these gnarly trigger points.
I understand your point. I think what I was trying to get at there is that if you recognize within yourself that I just can't control my behavior when this topic comes up, you have to remember what the outcome of your interaction will be if you blow up at a person or misrepresent their views or argue points that they're not making or become visibly upset and shaken and your heart is racing and your face is turning red. You have to ask yourself, how is this going to benefit them on reflecting on their views? So reminding yourself about the reaction that they're going to have to your behavior on the position that you're discussing. It's probably not going to result in them thinking anything constructively about what your position is. There's some argument whether you can make their position even worse. They may become more entrenched in their views, or they may not budge at all. It's hard to say what their response would be, but it's probably not going to be favorable. My sense is, going back to sort of the atheism-theism debate, think about a theist. Think about a theist who is promoting theism. Do you think that they'd want to have examples of atheists arguing against them or atheists politely engaging with them about their views?
Yeah, definitely the latter.
You think that they would want the polite ones?
Oh,
I
see what you're saying. For them to further broadcast or convert people to their point, they would want the atheist to be losing his mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So on a broader perspective, so we talked about sort of how your conversation partner would react, but you also have to envision how other people who might be observing that interaction might be reacting. So they may be saying, yep, there they go again. There's another one of those emotional liberals who just can't keep their cool when this topic comes up. So you have to consider the implications of your behavior on people's perception of the claim that you're making. Which really, there's not a relationship between the truth of the claim and the behavior that you're displaying. But humans, when they observe that, it's something that we naturally do. It's easier for me to discount your position when I notice you becoming emotionally overreactive to this topic, because I can just brush you off. But if you're being calm and focused and respectful and you're striving for clarity, I've seen this happen in YouTube comments where they say, I've never seen somebody take that position and be so calm. They've really given me something more to think about now. I just can't lump that one person in with this other group that I've demonized. So there's a benefit to controlling your emotions. But I get what you're saying. Like, these are topics that we should be talking about. So it's okay to be passionate about them, but there's that fine line between being passionate and being contentious. And that's the point that I think we need to make sure that we can throttle.
Yeah, and I guess that just comes down to I don't even know what does that, how does someone go from releasing that trigger point and being able to have that conversation more?
Practice.
Yeah. Practice.
Practice and watching people not lose their cool. Like, it goes back to the other point. I didn't know people can talk about, I've never seen an atheist talk to a theist who says that you can't be moral without a God, and the atheist not lose their cool. But I just watched somebody do that. How did they do that? How could I do that? Because I can now see the advantages. He got much further in their conversation because he didn't chase that. He didn't go into the weeds on that. He didn't chase what's the word I'm looking for? I'm drawing a blank on the metaphor, but you get my point. Like a squirrel, you see these distractions and you want to chase them because how dare you say that I can't be capable of doing this one thing, or how dare you view my claim in that way? And now I'm ready to battle. If you can resist that and just focus on how they've concluded that this is true. So the technique of SE, there's a technique, there's a semi-structure to it. But if you're using the structure with an ill-prepared mental mindset, you're gonna be battling yourself. And if you can take yourself out of the battle and focus on them, you're gonna have a great conversation. So there are a lot of variables that you yourself can control, and if you can learn to control for them, you're going to be good at this technique.
Yeah. I wanted to avoid actually talking specifics about the technique because I wanted people to be curious about it and look into it. But I don't know, maybe you could just give us some examples of how you might start an SE conversation where, what are some typical questions that you ask at the onset of a conversation to get the ball rolling?
Okay. Well, the examples that I put online are mostly initiated, where somebody's walking by and I say, do you have a few minutes to talk about a deeply held belief? I'm doing something called Street Epistemology. I'd like you, if you're interested, I'd like it if you would pick a claim that you think is true that impacts how you behave and interact in the world. So you not only think it's true, but it's motivating you to go out and behave in a certain way because you're sure that it's true to a fairly high degree of confidence. Now, if this was an organic conversation, I might just observe somebody say something. They make a claim. They ask me if they can pray for me, or
that's an interesting one.
Oh yeah. But that's a window, that's an opportunity to engage. And usually I do something similar. I say, well, before we pray, would you mind if we just explored why you think any of that stuff is true? Do you have a few minutes where maybe I can ask you a few polite questions? And they may say, whoa, I've never had that kind of reaction before. Usually people just say yes or no, and then they pray with me and I go on my merry way. So you may have to build a little trust as well. I try to be as transparent with what I'm doing without overwhelming them with too many details. So, and then kind of getting a sense, do they have the availability? Do they have some time to do? I'll wait for them to pick a claim. I try to get a sense of how sure they are on a scale from 0 to 100 that it really is true, because it's their level of confidence that we're exploring. Can they justify the level of confidence in their claim that they think is true? So once we've established the claim and we've nailed down definitions, if there's any ambiguity there, then I usually ask them, how did you form this view? Or what would you say is the biggest reason for thinking that this claim is factually true? Sometimes, though, you may notice, we're really getting jammed up on objective truth versus subjective truth. If at any point you notice that they may be thinking that truth is subjective, stop talking about their claim and their reasons and their methods, and then visit that. You may even want to start with that and say, before we get to this claim of that you think prayer works or that your God is real, do you mind if I just ask you a few questions to see how you're viewing the word truth or the word true? But you can kind of skip that part, but just keep it in the back of your mind that I may have to circle back to that, because if they don't think truth is objective, then whatever reason that they surface doesn't even matter, really.
Right.
Because just any old reason will do. Even no reason will do for people who thinks truth is subjective. But so once we've identified the claim, I might ask them what their biggest reason is. I listen to the reason, I'll repeat it back. Then I'll ask them, well, what level of impact in your confidence is this reason contributing to? And they may say, what are you talking about? I said, well, you gave me this reason. The reason that you think prayer works is because you prayed for somebody 2 weeks ago, and then you met them a week after you've prayed for them, and they self-reported that their issue went away. So my question is, if that event hadn't happened, would you be less sure that prayer works? It's an eliminator question of sorts. And they may say, well, no, even if that event didn't happen, I know prayer works because it says so in the Bible. So now we've identified a different reason that they're saying. So now I can focus on that reason. And you can keep repeating that until you've isolated the reason that, if they discover to their satisfaction, is not a good reason, that they would lower their confidence in their claim. Then that's the reason that I would talk about with them. I would explore with them by asking questions. Now, once you've narrowed down the reason that supposedly contributes to their confidence, and a lot of people have very interesting ways of wiggling out of that. Even if they say, yeah, it's really all comes down to the Bible for me. And if we discovered that the Bible wasn't reliable or in some way, I would drop down from a 100% to a 20% of my confidence that this is true. You may have that conversation about the Bible and they realize to their own satisfaction that they can't back it up, but they would still be just as sure that it's true. So be prepared for false leads, I suppose. But I just kind of keep repeating that with their reasons, and then we get to the methodology that they're using. And this is the epistemology part. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, or in the case of street epistemology, it's by what means are you going about figuring out that that's a good reason? What is the process that you're using to verify that that's a quality reason? And a lot of people don't give thought to their their methods. So if you can help them discover, by you asking questions, that their methodology for validating the quality of their reasons, that there's something amiss there, that's usually enough to help a person realize, maybe I can't justify my current level of confidence. This has implications for the level of confidence that I told this guy with regards to prayer working, or my position on UBI, or the law of attraction. Everything that I've outlined here, Eric, is you can basically follow that for pretty much any claim that anyone makes, even claims that I make. Like if you were to SE me on something, I would advise you to use that. And you would probably end up helping me take another look at my views. And then it kind of ends. We try to recognize and watch for people becoming a little bit unnerved by the discussion that you've had. A discussion 5 or 10 minutes on that, like that approach, could really shake a person up to the point where they may say, okay, I think I need to go now. Or they may say, would you still pray with me? You've got me thinking. They may reach out to their pastor. You may never see them again, but maybe you do meet them later, or they reach out to you. So it's basically helping a person realize that, man, maybe I really can't justify this to myself. And then I tend to just end it and leave them alone so that they can process it. But give them an opportunity where they can come up to me later if they want to talk with me, or encourage them. If sometimes people ask for resources. Now that we've had 3 or 4 conversations, I don't know if I can believe this anymore. Now what do I do, Anthony? You were a role in this. Help me. So be prepared for that too. Yeah. Like in the case of your friend, they may say, you've really got me thinking about UBI now. What resource would you recommend that I go to?
Yeah.
So be prepared for a little hand-holding when they're ready for that.
Well, she actually got me thinking about my position, which was an interesting thing. So I kind of had to revise my beliefs a little bit after talking with her.
Interesting.
Yeah. But would you say the goal, in a way, I mean, the primary objective is probably to help the person realize the foundation on which their beliefs stand, but a secondary objective might be something like to introduce doubt? Would it be, is it your goal to make the person doubt what they're thinking?
Not necessarily, because they could have really good reasons and methods for justifying their confidence. So imparting doubt on a view that's justifiable in some way could be problematic. So doubt isn't always my goal, but it can be the outcome. It is often the outcome of these conversations. I don't think that there's anything wrong with saying, just so you know, just so that you're aware, it's entirely possible by the end of this short conversation that you may be wondering about your current position. I might use the word wonder because doubt has a stigma attached to it.
Yeah.
By just saying, like, more than likely, you're going to doubt what you think is true by the time that we're at the end of this. I suppose you could do that, but you have to consider the impact that such a disclosure would have on their openness, which gets to the ethics of SE. How much do we disclose? Do we have an obligation to disclose? Should we lay it all out on the line, even at the risk of jeopardizing the progress of the conversation that you're attempting to have in the first place? These are gray areas that I don't know. I don't know what the answers are.
Yeah.
We talk about that in the SE communities. We're building a course for teaching people how to do this, and there will be a module on ethics where I'm sure we'll cover these ideas. But I think ultimately it's up to the practitioner. How invested are you in this approach, and how much consideration do you want to give to the impact that these questions can have on the people that you're asking them to?
Mm-hmm. I'd like to stick on doubt for a second, because you tweeted recently something like, should doubt be avoided? I think it was a really simple tweet. And I was like, this is a silly question. No, doubt should not be avoided. It should be embraced. It should encourage you to find people who maybe know more about the topic or resources. But what brought you to ask that, and how do you feel about doubt?
I'll take the second part first. I think doubt is useful. And I think 80 to 90% of the people who replied to that tweet, it wasn't a survey, but it was just a tweet. Most people said, no, doubt is beneficial. There's advantages to doubt. Now, I have a largely skeptical, atheistic audience, I suppose, on my YouTube channel and Twitter. So there's probably some differences there based on the views that you hold or the worldview that you think is actually correct. So my position is that doubt is useful. I actually wrote this down. I was thinking about tweeting it. I wrote down, uncertainty is underrated. There's value to being uncertain about the things that we think are true, because it gives us an opportunity to change our views and be more in line with what's happening in reality. But it can be a painful process also. There can be a cost to recognizing that I can't justify this belief. So doubt can be painful. So inflicting doubt on somebody, I think, is problematic. Imparting doubt on somebody when they understand that it's a possibility could be one of the most noble things that a human could probably do to another person. It's arguable for sure. It's definitely debatable. I don't know if I would debate it. I think we could probably we should SE that claim, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
I think there's probably some discussions. I think I've seen discussions on where we use the SE approach on some of the things that we incorporate or consider when we're doing SE. The origination of that tweet, something like, should doubt be avoided? I think that was the tweet. If I'm not mistaken, I was watching a video from a Christian apologist who was doing a deconstruction of one of the two books that spawned Street Epistemology. I think either he was doing a review of one of the books or maybe a video that he saw. It may have been a video that he saw, not one of mine, but somebody else's. And it seemed like he saw doubt as problematic, and that since our questions could result in doubt, his conclusion, therefore, was that street epistemology is bad. It's problematic. It's harmful because doubt can be an outcome of it. So that watching somebody view doubt in that way prompted me to ask the question on Twitter. I think also to maybe reach that person who follows me on Twitter, where maybe he can read the comments below it, where it's not me saying it, but it's him observing it, and other people too. where maybe it might plant a few seeds and get people thinking about it. Or, conversely, I might see a response to that tweet where I might come around and say, maybe doubt is actually more problematic than I currently think.
I think maybe, I don't know. I don't have obviously an answer to the question, but I wonder if people's perception of what doubt means is really the problem and not doubt itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. There's a conversation on my channel. It's called Doubt is of the Devil, or Doubt is from the Devil. So there is a stigma in certain circles about the word doubt. This is why I often try to soften the impact of the word doubt in populations that have been raised to think that it's demonic in some cases. Let's be frank. There are people who are raised to think that doubt is of the devil. They really do think that. However, they question and wonder and doubt about things all the time, about other claims. It's just certain claims are off limits to doubt. But that in itself could be a good discussion. What is so special about this belief where you shouldn't be allowed to wonder or question or doubt about it? And notice that I mentioned a couple of different words that you can use in replace of doubt, but I don't think that you should hide the possibility that doubt can be an outcome of it. What is doubt? What do you think doubt is? I have some thoughts on it.
I think doubt is just the opposite of confidence, right? Doubt is recognizing the possibility that you may not have the full picture, right? Doubt is uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also, I agree. I do also think that it's a feeling. It's an uneasiness in your mind where things aren't quite as stable as you thought that they were. And that could be earth-shaking to people's worldviews, especially if you think that you can only be good because you think certain beliefs are true. So, plus all the other baggage that people have loaded on to the word doubt, that you should avoid it, push away your doubts, doubt your doubts. How many believers or former believers have been taught that? So where a lot of people are taught to avoid those feelings of doubt. It's an uncomfortable feeling. Being doubtful or uncertain is not often a comfortable feeling for many people. But I have to say, I don't know how you feel about doubt. Well, I don't know how. Did you respond to my tweet?
Yeah, I did. I said, yeah, I said doubts. I said, forget my exact words, but it was something like doubt is something that should be explored, was basically the essential nature of it, was that if you feel doubtful, you should explore why. You should run towards it, right?
Yeah. Isn't doubt the sense that you should probably take another look at what you think is true?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a beacon or a warning sign that maybe I'm a little bit off course here.
But it's so stigmatized. Like, I mean, even in the political landscape, to have doubt about something your party believes is to be an outcast. Like,
or if you change your mind, you're a flip-flopper because you doubted it and now you changed your mind. And now I'm seeing you as weak because you had this one position. John Kerry comes to mind. I don't even remember what the thing was, but he was called a flip-flopper for some. But this is a common charge for politicians who change their mind. But wouldn't you want a politician to change their mind because they did start to wonder, question, research, change their mind, revise their position, project a new position? That's growth. So doubt leads to great things, but it's stigmatized because the risk that it poses for unjustifiable beliefs.
That's, I think there's a lot of things going wrong in America right now in terms of people's ability to stay open to information and to stay open to alternate perspectives. But I feel as though the threat that people might not actually have the answers, and so this fear of doubt is a huge problem. I mean, it makes it, I don't know. I don't know how you solve that either.
Well, I mean, I think it starts with a cultural shift, making it okay to say I don't know, teaching kids at a young age to wonder. Like Dawkins, one of Dawkins's latest book is something about wonder, right? Like the gift of wonder, or something along those lines. I don't. There are several books by skeptics that try to emphasize the benefit of wondering, questioning, and ultimately that's about doubting.
Yeah,
because there's a benefit to it, and it needs to be destigmatized.
Yeah. From personal experience, when I started this podcast, it was originally a mental health podcast. I went through a depression and came out of it kind of invigorated with the possibilities of how life could be completely improved by addressing your issues. And so I was interviewing a lot of people in the mental health community. And, I can speak to having a certain amount of pressure on myself going into conversations and feeling as though I shouldn't have room for doubt. I need to be the one who knows everything. And as soon as I switched that and started realizing, no, like I'm having these conversations because I don't know. And the goal is not to sound smart. The goal is to ask smart questions and to fill in the blanks. And once I made that switch, it became a lot easier. And I don't know how you scale that, but it seems like it needs to happen.
One way to possibly scale it is to have extremely visible examples of famous people that we respect, modeling doubt and showing that it's okay to question. It's okay to look stupid or give an answer that wasn't really poorly thought out, but you're humble enough to acknowledge that and that you've shown growth as a result. But I think there's a because it's so stigmatized, people think I need to show strength and confidence in this position, when strength and confidence in unjustifiable beliefs is dogma. That's probably like a good definition of dogma. When you're being dogmatic about a position and you won't even budge on it because you're so sure that it's true. That's a very problematic mindset. And as we can see it playing out in these factions, these tribes that are battling with each other on these ideas, and we're misrepresenting positions and we're acting more confident about the things that we think are true, that we really oftentimes can't back up to ourselves. And that discovery is really a big part of SE, is helping people reach that point where they say, I probably shouldn't be so dogmatically certain about that. I should probably back off of that just a tad because I want to be open to it. And I don't want to be running around with beliefs that may not be true, even though it might be painful. And that whole thing is baked into this approach.
I just kept thinking about Joe Rogan as we were talking over this last bit. I feel like he's...
Me too. I was actually thinking, yeah.
He's just setting such a good example, I think, in terms of not trying to be someone who comes across as knowing everything, but is able to have, physicists, I don't know, all different types of people on his podcast and have conversations that are just based in not like exposition or display of his knowledge, but rather just a curiosity. It's like replacing that fear of doubt with a genuine curiosity that I think is very valuable.
He's a curious conversation partner, interrogator, using the polite version of that word. He will often say, listen, I'm just a dumb jock who doesn't have it. I'm a dummy. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a comedian. I'm an actor, whatever. He lowers himself intentionally to show in a very powerful way that he recognizes that he doesn't know everything and he's not pretending to. And that's authentic. That's authenticity. And that's one of the reasons why I think his show's so popular. And I still see a lot of people who criticize people who watch his show because they think, well, he's platforming a bad idea. And that goes through my mind too. When I watch Alex Jones just go on and on and on about these one insane thing after the other, it concerns me that these ideas are given such a broad platform. And then, frankly, I think that negative can often overshadow the positive stuff that is happening on his show, like the stuff that we just talked about. The modeling of wonder is a fantastic thing, but it's often overshadowed by the bombastic claims that his guests often make. So that's something that he hopefully is aware of and is trying to work on.
Do you think that that's, I mean, I wonder as well if that's problematic. And I've talked to a couple friends. One friend in particular I'm thinking of, we were talking about Alex Jones and his appearance on Joe Rogan. And, you know, I think Alex Jones is he's performative. He's a kook for lack of a better word. But I guess I was arguing the point that I still see value in hearing what he has to say and knowing the spectrum of ideas that are out there is valuable to me. And I don't know if you see the same value or if there's ideas that we shouldn't even be entertaining.
I don't think there's any idea that we shouldn't ever entertain. The question is, how much weight should we be giving it? And when you put somebody like Alex Jones on a podcast like Joe Rogan's, who reaches millions of people, although I have to think with Spotify, maybe it's gone down a little bit. That's a whole other topic. You think he's reaching more people? I think he's probably reaching less, but he's reaching a lot of people. And we're actually using it as a vehicle for this conversation too. So there are benefits to that. But there's so much nonsense that's being promoted by Alex Jones, for example, or even other guests that he's had. It does make me wonder what's the algorithm? What's the cutoff? Where does it break? At what point does it become problematic? And at what point is it educational and informative, useful? Sometimes the needle's right there in the middle, isn't it? And it's kind of tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time very much. I enjoyed this chat very much, Anthony. Is there anything you feel like you want to add to my listeners? A lot of listeners here will not be familiar with street epistemology until this episode. So I don't know if there's anything you want to end on, but.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me on your show. This is one of my favorite topics, so I love talking about it. And I really think we covered some new ground in a way too. Cool. That doesn't normally come up in interviews that I've done. So I'm really excited to get this one shared. I think for people maybe new to street epistemology is perhaps check out my YouTube channel or search for street epistemology and watch some recent examples, maybe something within the last 2 years or so, because there are some older examples out there that are, I guess, probably not the best examples because we've been growing. We've been getting better at this. Mm-hmm. The other thing too is go to streetepistemology.com and you'll find links to communities where people are gathering to talk about this. There are probably a good 20 to 50,000, maybe 100,000 people who are currently aware of the approach, and they're moderately interested. They're interested in this approach to one degree or the other, and surface your questions or your concerns or share one of your videos. And if you want to talk about something that you noticed, or maybe you even want to have somebody question one of your own views. One of the links is to communities. And I think there's a link to a Discord server there that you can join. In fact, there's a training class going on right now. I think every Saturday or Sunday, I think we do a training class. Volunteers do this. I'm not doing it. Just other people from around the world just want to teach people how to do this. We're developing a course for people to teach themselves how to do this. So yeah, if what we said today was at all intriguing, watch a few examples, watch how our conversation partners are reacting to wondering, reacting to doubt, reacting to the calm, gentle, inquisitive approach. And I hope you consider adopting the approach in your own interactions, because I think it will probably improve your understanding of their views, and it's going to probably result in you growing as a person.
Well said, Anthony. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
It was my pleasure, Eric. Thank you.